Good evening. It's 5:35 on Wednesday, September 9th, 2015. It is the monthly meeting of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. Could we please have a roll call?
Francis Rigberg Baker.
Here.
Kevin Bowersox Johnson.
Here.
Daniel Larson.
Here.
Janice Mitchell. Lisa Mosley. Peter Resnick.
Here.
And Aisha Lam Sobe.
Here.
Thank you. Looking over the agenda, are there any additions, corrections, edits that need to be made? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? All right, looking over our minutes from our August 12th meeting, are there any additions, edits, or corrections that need to be made? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Thank you. Our first item of business is public participation. Seeing none, hearing none, we will move forward to old business, which we have none, so we could jump right to our new business. And the review and discussion of the draft of the preliminary reports from the IDOT Traffic Stop Data Task Force.
So we've gotten a few comments from the public, many of which we have now folded into a revision, which you will see on the agenda page. I don't think there was anything big and significant in the changes we've made so far. What I'd like to do is sort of open the floor to those who've gotten through a little of it, see if there are some comments, and I would encourage you, next week, our September meeting is going to be the second to last meeting the task force will have. Comments close September 30th, and then our mid-October meeting will be our final meeting for final approval of the report. So anything we can discuss today that you think we might pass over to the task force would be great. And if there are any last-minute comments in the next couple of weeks, those would be greatly appreciated as well. So if there's anybody who has comments, that'd be good.
Fran?
I focused on the executive summary because that's what a lot of people will read, possibly the only thing. And I have two comments on the second paragraph of that that I think would make it a little more fair and inclusive and probably avoid some possible misunderstandings. The first one is in the first sentence. Nationally, we are witnessing the inevitable social tension and strain associated with transitioning from law enforcement as a method of controlling minority communities to law enforcement that collaborates with these communities as full participants in our society. And I don't disagree with that, but I have a suggestion that, and I like the strength of it, but I think I would say transitioning from law enforcement too often used as a method of, because, I mean, everybody is not guilty of this, although it is a huge problem. I don't mean to minimize that, and if that would seem to minimize it, that's at the discretion of the committee. This is just my suggestion. And I might also add controlling minority or marginalized communities. So it's broader. This is not just a problem about race. It's a problem about any group that is perceived by the property classes in general to be a threat to their life or property are generally have a harder time with the police, because that's the line the police are really there to enforce. Which leads us into our next subject, community standards. Again, I like it, but I would add to it, expand it a little bit. Thus, in a very real sense, law enforcement is the community's mechanism to enforce its own standards, for better or worse. But I would like to add, ideally, its most well-informed and enlightened standards. I want to say something about not just, I'm not a moral relativist, and I think there's some things that are just wrong, and too often the standards that are enforced are terrible, and that's what we're worried about. Of course, it will enforce its standards of the standards of those in power, but we want them to enforce the best standards, and they should follow the edge of enlightenment and information on on those subjects. So I would just expand that a little bit. Those are my only comments. Thanks.
And on the second one, both are very well taken, and I think will be happily adopted by the task force. And I would ask that if you would write them up as a comment that we could submit formally, that'd be great. On the second one, I think it's interesting, and one thing you didn't include in your suggestion was you mentioned the standards of those in power. And
Yes.
It's not just that we want the better standards, the most appropriate standards, but the standards that represent the best of everyone across the board, including those not in power. And so-
Excellent point. Yes,
Yeah,
I
and so-
completely agree with that.
And so I think we can, if you have some wording that might capture that, that'd be great, if you could give me a submission. Otherwise, I'm sure we can work on something, but I do like that.
I think some of what informs me is my experiences in the late 60s in Berkeley. There was a lot of the bad press about the police and a lot of bad descriptions of them, epithets and so forth. And there was a lot of bad stuff going on. But every once in a while someone would say, remember Officer Clancy. And that sort of meant, remember when you were growing up and your cop was your friend and you might have lived in a community that, for better or worse reasons, was unaffected by some of these problems. It wasn't problematic, and there are a lot of well-meaning people on the other side of the conflict. So,
Yeah, I
remember
think
Officer Clancy.
We've been fighting this balance on the task force for some time, obviously, and it is a balance between recognizing, and I think we do in several places in the report, that our police department does a lot better than many, if not a lot better than most. And on the flip side, we don't want to diminish the bad experiences that folks in this community have had, and so it is that balancing act.
And that's super important. It's probably the overriding important thing now, and that's why I say if you want to keep it this punch, keep it. I'm just saying I think about the police always being put on that line between the people with power and the people without power, the people with property versus, which is often what it is, versus the people without property, the vested interest in the community, certainly not all the interest in the community. And they're put there, and they generally don't come from that privileged class. So, and that's why often people are brought in from other parts of the country when there's unrest, particularly in a foreign country. They'll bring in people who don't look and see their neighbors on the other side of that line. And because that would not be helpful to the people who are trying to enforce whatever it is they're trying to enforce.
I have a question. I'm sorry,
Please.
I wasn't here last month, but so is it, the intent is that this is the IDOT report, so it is concerned with essentially two things, traffic stops and African Americans.
Significantly. So what we did is we looked at all of the IDOT data, which is across race. And the primary finding of this report is that African Americans are the ones who are
Right.
significantly
Sure.
affected.
Sure.
That's the context. I was thinking about that as Fran was mentioning her first comment. I think it's okay in this context-setting part to mention those other marginalized communities, but it is clearly, when it comes down to it, this report is about race and African Americans in particular.
Okay.
Any other comments that folks have?
I found myself going down the rabbit hole of the next step, and I'm concerned about next steps because I kept going down the rabbit hole of solutions. Because the data is there's a lot of it, number one, and it definitely outlines some issues that we have that we absolutely must address as a community. And then as I was reading that, of course, it's natural to go down the solutions road of like, how do you do this, and all the double-edged swords that go along with solutions. So I am a little concerned about September and October being kind of the end of this committee and where we go from here, because I would really like to see that some of the proposed recommendations and maybe, some additional things go into play afterwards as far as implementing change. I'd like to be as creative as possible. If we could move from, I don't know, one example that came to my mind was Fix-It tickets and how that goes down this rabbit hole of so many other problems. And if we could do, prove receipt from an auto supply store that this has been fixed in 30 days and the ticket goes away, or some other creative solutions that. So anyway, that's the rabbit hole I found myself going because there was so much data, but it was also really important data and also really outlined some real issues that we have.
So let me comment a bit on this. We mention in several places in the report, and I think pretty close to the top, that the task force has never considered this the end of the process. Right. It's the beginning. The task force was there to come to some conclusions and some recommendations, which we have done, but it's very much tossed back into the laps of the City Council. One of the things that we've discussed is that the HRC, that other groups might be able to take up the starting to implement some of the ways of solving these problems. The other thing I would mention is in some of the recommendations, and you'll already see some edits in them this go-round, some of them are very controversial. In particular, the task force really wanted to point out that the issue with doing traffic stops and discovering drug violations is deeply problematic, given who it affects. And so we have been wrestling with wording that will basically say to the City Council, you should look into this.
Right.
This is non-trivial. It is not an obvious, just stop giving tickets for possession of marijuana under some amount. And so some of this is going to require real study, and some of the wordings of stuff were exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, therein lies the double-edged sword that I was talking about. Like, you go to do an investigative stop.
Right.
And then you smell marijuana of some sort, which leads to going further than it was supposed to go to begin with. But as a citizen, you want that because you don't want somebody on the road that might be under the influence. But at the same time, was the initial stop necessary? And it's like once that information is presented itself, it's hard to stop that ball from rolling from a moral and an ethical perspective.
Right.
And so therein lies the double-edged sword.
And we all agreed during that discussion that impairment was clearly something that you wanted to deal with as an officer. There's no question.
Right.
Do you want to deal with, you've done the stop, there's no sign of impairment, but you spot
on the seat
or in the ashtray or something, and how do you deal with that if you do? And as we discussed it, Andy Charles, Sergeant Charles from the police department is on the task force. As we discussed what the implications of that were, it's complicated. And one of the reasons the City Council implemented giving tickets for marijuana possession was to get out of the state laws regarding felonies and misdemeanors, which are much more complicated and get you into the system. So it's going to be a long conversation on several of these fronts. If there are particular recommendations that you think could use that kind of finesse, I'm glad to take that back. If there are particular recommendations that you see us as the HRC taking up, I'm sure that would be great input, and we've mentioned in a couple of places that I believe we've mentioned the Human Relations Commission in the report, but we might make more specific recommendations if you've got them. So I appreciate that, and anything you can do to tighten those up would be great.
That was my one largest observation was, what do you want from, what is this report, what does this task force need from us? I saw it a little, yeah, I'll get some recommendations or some thoughts your way very soon on
And,
that.
and
because I was-
if there's stuff that especially can be clarified to make it clear that it's something the HRC wants to take up, and
Exactly.
maybe a comment that says, recommendation foo, if it said such and so, the HRC could really take that up as directly part of our mission statement. A comment like that would be greatly
Okay.
appreciated. Stuff like Fran has suggested where rewordings to make things clearer and to sharpen it up are also completely welcome.
Great.
So that would be great in the next few weeks.
As I said last week, I'll say it again, thank you, Peter. Some
Yeah, it's
great
amazing.
work for the community.
I've had a great
And a
task
great-
force and great staff to
And
work
thank you,
with.
and thank them as well, not you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The charts were really, I mean, that's what really did it, when you could go look and see the actual
Paul
line graphs
Testa-
that compare.
Paul Testa, our statistician, has been absolutely fabulous to work with, and he's very motivated to come up with different ways to look at the data to really explain it. So we've been very happy with the outcome. So thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
All righty. Any last observations, comments, questions for Peter? Alex?
The only thing I wanted to mention, Fran and Daniel, if you want the task force to motion to incorporate any edits on its next meeting, which is Wednesday, we would like to have your text into the office by Friday morning.
Okay.
If your creative juices get flowing on the weekend, you can get it to us by the day before Tuesday, and we will include it orally, but we won't be able to rule on it
Okay.
until the following. So those are, if you want us to be able to, the task force to rule, try to get it in by Friday morning, Friday noon, and then if you can't get to it, feel free to get it to us by the day before, and then we'll present it orally. Because in the agenda that Peter prepared, we have a provision where we can bring forward for discussion, but not ruling, motion at that point. That's all.
Great. Okay, our second item of business will be led by our Human Relations Officer, Alex. I know a little bit about this, and I've been excited this afternoon, as we discussed, what Alex would like to propose to the commission. So Alex, I'm going to turn it, the mic is yours, so to
Thank
speak.
you. You know, being part-time and looking at the operations of the office and the operations of the commission, one of the things, and of course, meeting with each of you and getting to know you, and you're beginning to see the many talents you individually hold, I have come to the conclusion that it would really be helpful to the HRO and to the commission to form 4 committees. And I wanted to bring to you a proposal that we form a committee on training and development, a committee on EEO enforcement, a committee on criminal justice, and a committee on public policy. And of course, this is all for discussion. What I was envisioning is that in terms of the committee on training and development, it would consist of 2 members and the HRO, and we would work together to increase the skill of the commission. We could plan things like the annual retreat, ongoing trainings, and prepare trainings for the community. The mayor and I are very interested, and some of you mentioned in the one-on-ones, on reaching out to the business community, reaching out to marginalized communities about their rights, their responsibilities, and this committee would be really helpful in developing that material. The second committee I envision would be a committee that would work with the HRO to look at our enforcement operations. I'm envisioning that we will need to put out some more rules that clarify some of the processes. especially when it comes to EEO certificates of compliance. There is an opportunity also to look at our overall EEO as a city, and I could really use the wisdom of the commission and the assistance of the commission. At this point, the one that to me feels like the most urgent is the Committee on EEO Enforcement, and strongly followed by the Committee on Training and Development. The third committee would be a Committee on Criminal Justice. Many of the issues that we face deal with criminal justice. Some of the work that has come out of the task force report is directly speaking to criminal justice issues. We're having a lot of individual persons is the word I want to use, in the minority community and in marginalized communities that are being brought into the criminal justice system in ways that is really prejudicial to their ability to recover, their ability to hold jobs, especially when they reach mature years. And anything that we can do to really help in that area would be important. Some of the things that would fall in this area would be things like cannabis enforcement, which is directly coming out of the task force. Another thing would be even things like mental health. There are various individuals that are being brought into the criminal justice system as holding tanks for them. And I recently, and I'll share this in the announcement portion of today, I had the privilege of attending a steering committee that is looking at how do we better respond to people that have mental health concerns and not bringing them into the criminal justice system. So this committee could deal with many of those kinds of issues. And referring to the parentheses, as I was envisioning, is some of these would be 2 members plus the HRO, and some would be 2 members with or without the HRO. Some of them need the HRO a little bit more to really form the partnership. The third would be the Committee on Public Policy. And that one I see more as, forgive the expression, a catch-all. This is one that can really sort of be a clearinghouse where we could look at, it's almost like a ER nurse in an emergency room, triaging what are the issues, what are the priorities, what needs to be brought to the commission so that we can work efficiently and responsively to whatever that concern might be. And under public policy, should we find a shift where women are suffering harm in our community? This public policy committee would elevate that issue and inform us and bring it to the consciousness of the commission. If we were to find that undocumented individuals are suffering issues with respect to health care, this committee would be able to identify that issue and triage it and bring it to the consciousness of the HRC for review. The overall, there are several reasons why I wanted to propose this. One is when you have an owner for something, it gets done. When you have an owner for something, that particular area doesn't fall through the cracks. And it would be nice that 2 people have sort of taken on, we're going to keep president conscious the need for being a well-trained and well-developed board. Consciousness on how are we doing in reviewing our EEO enforcement. Going back to the EEO enforcement, I forgot to mention, we would also look in that committee at the overall health of the ordinance, the human rights ordinance, the enabling ordinance. And I envisioned that we would look at it in comparison to leading ordinances, Champaign, several parts of the country, and see where are we leading. We have been leading for a very long time, but where have we fallen behind? And where are we vague? Where are we confusing? There are some parts where we could be a little clearer. Of course, these committees would not replace the body. The body is the ultimate, as you know, decision maker. These are just strong arms that are nimble, that are able to get out, get some work done, and come back to the larger committee and present some of the research that's been conducted, study that's been done, and harness the ability of the commission. As needed, these committees can bring in experts. I would envision that I could bring in Paul Testa, the statistician, to assist any one of these committees at a particular point. We could hire experts to come in and help us. We could invite members of the community. But the main members are those two members and the HRO. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and see what you thought, and if you found any one of these worthy, who might be a great member to be slotted in each one of them. I already have some ideas. Some of your talents are blaringly out there. Some of you are gifted in each one of these.
Peter?
One question, and I think the way you've stated it, I know what you mean, and maybe clarify the text that you've written. With regard to the Committee on EEO Enforcement, it sounds like you want to go beyond the employment issues in the ordinance and talk really about all of the ordinance enforcement issues.
Yes.
So if that's the case, I would suggest just make it the Committee on Ordinance Enforcement, because it's beyond that, the equal opportunity and employment question, which is what we usually mean by EEO. So,
Thank you. Excellent point. Yes.
But yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because when I first saw it, I thought, oh, well, there are other points, but I'm glad
Yes.
that committee would take that up.
Well, Alex and I already spoke, so I knew this was coming. My professional work has often led me into the realm of the criminal justice arena, so I would very much be interested in that. And Alex, also saying, I don't know if this would be under 1 or 3 or 4, but I think a somewhat pressing issue is our seeking filling the empty seats here on the commission.
That would be under one.
While there is a lot of diversity up here, I think there's some, we need more. I'll just say it that way. I don't mean to make light of it, but we need, we want more, we want the community. We're representative of the community in our own way, but there are other voices out there. So recruitment was the word I was searching for. So I don't know if that would be in development or just that kind of, as you mentioned, catch-all. But that's just, you know that, you're aware of that, and then I would be interested in any of the other 3. I'm less, 2 and 4 are a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but that might be good, to have a voice that's, have a perspective that would be required to learn. I just love the idea, and hope the rest of the commissioners are finding niches themselves.
So how would you like us to do this? Do you want us to volunteer to you, and you and Alex can chat about who should go on which committee and sort of make assignments, or?
Do we as a group need to decide whether or not this is the direction we wish to go in?
I think we got to probably
I mean-
start there first.
I also,
But then-
I mean, going back to your comment, Dan, in regards to recruitment and board or commission development, I think almost could be separate from community training and development, because, I mean, that in itself, right now especially, when you're low on numbers and you really want to do a recruitment effort, and then you want to implement a new, I mean, one of the things that I really appreciated my time with Todd when I got here, but they're just the intricate details of what's going to happen at a meeting. Do you understand Robert's Rules of Orders that go into orientation of a new commissioner that could be a part of that? And then finding the guests to come and speak from the outside. I mean, that's commissioner development. I mean, that's development of that. And that in itself could be a separate committee then going out. Like, I could see doing one or the other. I think doing both would almost be too much. So I would almost divide that into recruitment and development of us as a commission, and then development and training community-wide. I know that's going to ebb and flow based on whether or not we have full commissioners and we've recruited and we've trained, but like at a point like now, it could be rather time-consuming.
And that's a
Fran?
different thing from sitting down with a community group that we're trying to educate or learn from or whatever. Yeah, like, those are very different perspectives. Yeah.
Peter?
My sense of these committees is that these are really long-term standing committees.
Yeah.
Where training and development of commissioner development sounds like it would be an ongoing, over the years kind of thing. Recruitment sounds like sort of a spin something up to do recruitment when we get low, that normally we wouldn't be as low as we are. Luckily, we've gotten now, an addition. We're starting to build again, but we are so low now that maybe having a short-term committee separate from these standing committees to help Alex with recruitment issues might be a good thing.
But yeah, let's jump back to Kevin's excellent point. First, what are you guys' reactions to these ideas? Is this something that is something the direction we want to go in as a commission? I assume we're all on board, but
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
okay.
And I think when I look at certainly training and development and the enforcement issues, these are things that we have sort of done ad hoc all the time.
Yeah.
I know Lisa and others have
Training and
worked on the
development.
training and development before.
Absolutely.
I know that I've worked with a couple of people on the enforcement issues, what's going on in the ordinance. I think this fits naturally with the way we've sort of organized ourselves accidentally all along. So I think it's to make it formal, I think, is just fine.
Right, we have different members coming and going and different mayors coming and going.
Yep.
I think it gives us more focus. One of the things that Alex and I talked about in regards to one of my concerns was, I think we have a few things on the agenda that are very specific and constant, but I think from a overall purpose of a commission, I felt like we've had somewhat of a lack of vision or focus in those areas, and I think this gives us that. And I think the first, if decided that this would go forward, I think the first step for each of these committees is decide on their purpose, come up with a purpose statement, and, the issues that they could tackle, and then prioritize those issues. Because, obviously this could be another rabbit hole of getting too much overburdened, but like bringing back a very specific purpose statement and saying, here are some things that we think that this could handle. Here are what we consider possible priorities. What does the whole commission think? So I'm totally for it.
I think it's also good for accountability, like from people from the outside, like, because we've had a couple of years where we've been working on how to sort of like spread the news, spread the message that we exist, et cetera. But also people want to know, so what are they doing? And there will be different kinds of political climates, and it kind of makes things sort of, they're already there, the procedures are there, what we're doing, et cetera, yeah.
I think it's great because instead of this being the whole committee, if you feel you have a special responsibility for something, you're more likely to pay attention. If you notice I've noticed that if I notice something or I see a problem or I get an idea, I kind of don't know what to do with it because I don't associate the general meetings with bringing something like that. But if I have some kind of idea like that, I either can bring it to the committee and then to the whole, or I know where to go. I know the person who's kind of specially interested in that, and I can. There's like a path to doing something, So I like it a lot.
So do we need to do something formal to create these committees? I don't remember anything in our procedures that speaks to this. I think we can form them at any time.
I would recommend just a
We particularly
motion.
need a vote to do so. It sounds like
Most bylaws would require a committee to be created through at least a motion.
so.
Just so that there's consensus of the board that there's a purpose for doing so.
I'm happy to make a motion, at least for purposes of discussion, to form these 4 committees, the Committee on Training and Development, Committee on Ordinance Enforcement, Committee on Criminal Justice, and Committee on Public Policy. So moved.
I'll second it.
Discussion?
And the only thing I wanted to mention is I fully get the first 3, and I've already got ideas about what those 3 committees would do. The public policy being a catch-all, I'm happy to have it created. I think it's a fine idea. I don't have as much of an idea of what it really would do, but having that committee standing, at least for the time being, and seeing what the proposed statement of work, once it forms and gets going, I think is a fine thing.
Maybe, I think of public policy as like what the government is doing a little more. Maybe, I'm sort of thinking it as like the seasonal aisle in the grocery store. We could call it something like current community issues or something like that, or I'm not sure. But public policy is a little off-putting to me. It's sort of like, wow, you have to study that in college.
I'm happy to take a friendly amendment as soon as we come to consensus on
Right,
what the
okay,
name
sorry.
should be. So
I'm always editing.
No, I think I agree. Because at first I was wondering how much overlap there would be between community training and development versus public policy. But then when you think of something like how do we fit into public, not debate, but helping the police and the public come together when there's an issue that they want to protest, public protest, and how do we make it a win-win situation? Where do we fit in that? To me, that's public policy. So maybe public relations? Community
or
relations.
community relations.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those things are going to change, and we never know where they might come from or what they might look like.
So I'm happy to take that as a friendly amendment if my seconder will.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay.
Are there any other questions, comments regarding the motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Now, Peter, you threw out the notion, you put out the idea how should we make our desires known? I mean, would it be best, Alex, to email the both of us, or, I mean, you have some ideas you want to share? I don't mean to put you on the spot, or you want to have one-on-one conversations about?
One of the reasons that I'm bringing this up, apart from the several that I mentioned, accountability and having an owner and all of that, the other thing is I really like the medical model. I like the idea that there are highly trained in disciplines coming together to heal. And a cardiologist, a neurologist, an oncologist, really collaborating. And so part of my vision is that the persons that volunteer or nominteered or drafted, whatever the word you want to use, are going to bring already some natural talent. And then they're going to harness that talent. Some of it we will provide. We will get you the training, and we will provide you the training where we have it, so that you really are experts in that area for yourselves and for the community. If we need to pay for some of that training for you, we'll find a way to do that. So that's one of the big reasons also. And I need I want to know that expertise is there, and I can count on it and can collaborate with it. So I already noticed among each of you that you already have natural aptitudes in some of these areas. So if I mention a name, it's not that I don't see it in anyone else, but I just see a unique affinity in that person. But I see a unique affinity in ordinance enforcement for Peter. I see a unique affinity in criminal justice for Daniel. I see a unique affinity in training and development for Kevin. I see a unique affinity for community relations and or public policy in Francis. And Aisha, I haven't had a one-on-one yet, so that one she's a little bit of a wild card for me right now. So I would allow you to, discern your affinity. So that's sort of how I see it now. And anyone that has a draw to one of these committees, that would be excellent in and of itself, because they'll gain the competence in the work that's going to be done. The other thing I just wanted to mention is, you read my mind in terms of, my first goal was to form the committees, and as the committees are formed, we'll define the work. And one thing that you'll find it with me is that I try very hard to bite off what we can chew, and so keep it simple, you know. And so yes, eventually training and development will end up separating development of the board versus development in the community. But at least in the beginning, when it's growing together, would be a little bit easier to manage.
Peter?
So I'd suggest, especially since we're missing two members of the commission tonight, that you talk to the other two,
Okay.
collect from us sort of where we want to be, but we may find out that we're top-heavy on one committee and empty on another, and having those discussions with the individuals might help you and Alex sort of make some assignments that make sense.
Could you attach this, could you send this to me as an email, which I'll contact Janice and Lisa with? That'd be great. And I would also just, I did throw my hat in the ring for criminal justice. I also would be interested in potentially working on the EEO or Ordinance Enforcement Task Force, because that's long overdue. I've been slapping that together on my own, and there's a lot to learn from Peter if he were to be involved, or someone else. So I'm not claiming it, I'm just, I don't know, I'm publicly stating that. But I'm happy to work on any of these committees. I think it's a wonderful idea, long overdue. Fran, sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no. I just wondered if it was intentional that you put people on the committees whose names they wanted to change.
No.
So yeah, please. We won't make any decisions before we talk to Lisa and Janice, of course. So I'll accrue that data and maybe send out an email sometime next week with updates, and then seek your official, or I'd be interested, Kevin.
Can we just all commit to submitting all
There we go.
of the committees with our name on it with the order of priority
Yeah, that's
of
even better.
interest? This
Even-
way, all the data is there.
Perfect.
Thank
That-
you.
Wonderful idea. Yes, so, send that email to myself or Alex by a week from today. Is
Sure.
that reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Yeah, please,
Do it right
just,
now.
list your, Alex.
How about we'll prepare a form and we'll send it out, and you can just fill it on the form. First choice, second choice, third choice.
Okay, even-
That way you don't
even
have to
better.
Okay.
reinvent the wheel.
Even
Okay.
better. Wonderful. Alex, thank you. It's a wonderful idea. Sorry, any last comments, or?
Just thank you. Thank you so much. I put this together, I've been a little busy, and I put this together as quickly as I could, and so that we could discuss it, and you just kind of knew exactly where I was headed, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all. All right, moving to Alex, we got to keep you on at front here, because we are going to move forward to your staff report. Where would you like us to begin?
The approval of the EEO workforce statistics, and we have quite a few today.
Right.
I think it's the summer months, and everybody wants to do business with the city. The first case that applicant that we have is CMW Equipment. It's a first-time applicant, and having reviewed their data, we would like to recommend them for certification for 6 months.
One question on that as we're going through the first two. What is our sort of arbitrary cutoff number for too small to be
Had
dealing
been
with?
15, correct?
15? So it's right over the line. Okay. That's exactly what I was wondering.
15 is EEO standards.
Alex, please continue.
With Golf Acquisition Group, again, a first-time applicant, we've looked at their numbers. They've achieved 40% utilization of the minority workforce. We'd like to recommend them for 2-year certification. MyTech Services has achieved 7.6% utilization. We'd like to recommend them for 1-year certification. National Restoration Systems has achieved 40% utilization. We'd like to recommend them for 2-year certification. Passport Parking is a first-time applicant. However, they provided us with 2 sets of data, one from January and one from August. And the January had 36.5% utilization and 43% for August, and we'd like to recommend them for a 2-year certification. Western Waterproofing, we would like to, first-time applicant, has achieved a 3.1% utilization. We'd like to recommend them for 6 months provisional certification. I was wondering if we can just deal with that bulk and then move on to the next
Yeah.
bulk.
Is there a motion to get to discussion?
Sure. For purposes of discussion, I will move approval of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, of all 5 of those as per staff recommendation
Of the new applicants?
of the new applicants.
Is there a second?
CMW Golf Acquisition, MI Tech, National Restoration, Passport Parking, and Western
So
Waterproofing.
6.
6, yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Discussion? Comments, questions? Peter?
So the one that I noticed that was just odd to me was Passport Parking. They're located in Charlotte, North Carolina, so relatively large community, as I understand it. And their African-American representation is very, very low. Their Asian, as is their Hispanic representation, their Asian representation is very, very high. And that seems strange to me. Do we know what their business is? What the contract is for?
Yes, they're going to be working with the city to automate our meters so that they can use
They're the
credit
ones where you
cards.
can use your phone,
Yeah.
like on campus, to
Uh-huh.
like
Okay.
add time to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Park.
And I haven't had a chance to update the commission, but one of the things we are doing now is that when we do send out letters, we notify them of areas that we'd like them to look at and strengthen workforce utilization. And we could always comment that we'd like them to review their utilization of the African American and Latino workforce.
And I guess, well, generally speaking, our pattern has been for 2-year certification, it was mostly on the premise that there was really nothing much to comment on. My motion notwithstanding, the only question I've got is perhaps a 1-year certification is more appropriate, simply because the numbers are just strange looking.
I have a question about that you bring that up, and that is, from the point of view of enforcing these laws, can we make distinctions like that? Or do we just have to look at the figure and say, okay, 43%, and not make distinctions about, given the intention of these laws, the spirit of them, that might be something we should be able to make distinctions about, but I don't know that we can legally do that.
Peter?
I know that in the past, we have looked at, for instance, companies that have come from communities and looked at their
Demographics.
their demographics and said, oh, well, okay, this particular company has a very poor representation, but they have no option but to hire from their community. I think I've never heard of an issue with us looking at that information, especially given that I believe the way the ordinance is written, we are looking to see whether they are giving equal opportunity to folks. If we suspect that their numbers are non-representative, we would ask them to make a good faith showing that they are in fact giving those equal opportunities and ask those questions. And if they can't show that, then we might start to say, well, perhaps they're not in compliance.
You can even see a photo of their employees on their website.
That's very interesting. So I mean, unless, Alex, you know of something that would prevent us from looking at these things.
No, I have no objection and believe that that distinction would be permissible. And I also actually feel that 1 year is appropriate, actually.
I don't think I can amend my own motion.
Okay. Could s-
And we can do it as a friendly amendment if someone wants to suggest a different time.
Opposed to a hostile amendment.
Well, exactly.
I'd like to propose a supportive amendment, friendly one, that we approve Passport Parking Incorporated for 1 year.
No objection from me.
Okay.
Who seconded the motion?
I did. I will second. Sorry. I'm looking at, since I seconded it, I assume we can go into discussion.
But if you'll take it as a friendly amendment to the motion to go for 1 year for Passport.
Yeah, I will second that amendment.
Are there any additional comments, questions, observations?
I just want, okay, I want to be clear is, when we have these numbers, this is them, this is all of them. And they are working in North Carolina. And essentially, they are trying to get business here in Urbana. They've already got it on campus and in Champaign and all over the country, which I don't know why they don't have more people, but anyway. So we can't, so we're telling them, if you want to work with us here, this is what we recommend. But I would assume they're in other states and they're in other cities and they're, I don't know, yeah.
Peter?
So the way our ordinance works, they have to show that they are engaged in equal opportunity employment. And if they fail to do so, that is basically a contract violation with the city. So the purpose of our review is to say, okay, they have claimed they are an equal opportunity employer, and we as a city are taking responsibility to actually check that. And we do so through the Human Relations Commission. We check to see if they are conforming. We have, I am quite sure, made questions of folks who have very large corporations and said, perhaps you'd like to tell us how you are going to do better in the future, and they've made adjustments based strictly on our ask.
Right,
So-
like, I know we had sort of like, when there's been an economic downturn, we can recognize that, but this company is growing. It is like growing really fast, so I would assume they're gonna be hiring more and more people. Anyway, yeah, so I think a year is like max.
Sounds good.
I mean, so coming from an HR perspective, in regards to hiring, I completely agree that we need to look at all minority categories. But there's so many more categories that are not mentioned in any way, shape, or form on that form that makes a place diverse. And so when I see race alone at 43, 45%, I mean, from an HR perspective, that's pretty impressive.
I agree.
I am looking at, I mean, we're full of double-edged swords tonight, but looking at the North Carolina population census data, they're the 16th largest city in the U.S. They have 49% identified as white, 35% African American, 13% Hispanic or Latino, 6% other, 4% Asian, and 2% two or more, and less than 1% of American Indian, 3 or more races, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. So I do expect more from the company at some level, but I also recognize 45% minority population of a workforce in itself is somewhat impressive as well.
And essentially, it's
But-
a startup, so,
Right. But it's 35% of the population are African American, and that is not reflective in any way, shape, or form in their employment.
Peter?
I will point out, I mean, the numbers are the numbers, and
Yeah.
we can look at those purely, but certainly if we go and ask them questions,
Yeah.
and not that they would ever say so directly, but imagine a universe where they came back and said, oh, the reason we have so many folks of Asian descent in our population is because the CEO's husband happens to be Asian and it's all of his family members,
Yeah.
and everybody else is white. That would give us pause to say perhaps they're not employing people
Right.
using equal opportunity. So I think it's at least worth the question, and to say, you've got a large African American population down there. What's going on?
Right.
Why don't you have that workforce?
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of assumptions. For example, assuming that their workforce is local. I mean, because
Exactly.
they're a nationwide company, their workforce might be spread over the U.S.
There's
and
also
so-
the rarefied air of the startup environments. And, I mean, there are a lot of, other companies that are dealing with these same issues, this kind of criticism for their lack of diversity, because there's this pool of this environment where people are just always, around each other. Yeah.
It's the technical world in general is going to have its own population characteristics. What surprises me here isn't so much a lot of Asian, but the small number of women.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
if they're going to point to that population has a lot of women.
If it turns out, for instance, that this is mostly a company doing technical work, and those 16 Asian employees happen to all live in China, that might give us another idea of what's going on. I think it's worth asking the question.
Mhm. I think it's fine. I think it also makes us think more about how do we ask these questions up front in the future more specifically, like geographic location of employees. Is it local? Is it, international? Is it, is the business a family-owned business? Like, how many of the employees are related to one another? Whatever the case may be. But it makes us, as we look at more global contracts that want to work with us, it makes us look at the questions that we ask up front so that we don't have to go back and forth.
So
About
there's a
50%
motion
is female.
on the floor to follow staff recommendations with the friendly rejoinder that passport parking be actually a one-year recommendation. Is there any additional discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, the same? Okay. Now, we have a list of renewals. Alex, could we turn it back over to you, please?
Yes. In terms of renewals, we have Applied Research, who has achieved 14.2% utilization. We'd like to recommend them for certification for 1 year. Champagne Signal and Lighting achieved 8.7 utilization, and we'd like to have them approved for recertification for 6 months. Clark Dietz, 8.3% utilization. We'd like to recommend recertification for 1 year. Corrective Asphalt, 0.0% utilization in 2015. We would like to recommend them for recertification for 1 year. That would be a reduction from the last time they applied. Central Illinois Tile achieved 14.3% utilization. We'd like to recommend their recertification for 2 years, which is what was previously certified. Horror Construction achieved 9.5% utilization, and we'd like to recommend them for 1 year recertification. Ileana Construction achieved 11.8% utilization. We'd like to recommend them for recertification for 1 year, which is a reduction from their last certification. Kinney Contractors achieved 4.5% utilization. We'd like to recommend recertification for 1 year, which is a reduction from their last certification of 2 years. Open Road Paving achieved a 10.6% utilization. We'd like to recommend their recertification at 2 years to match their last recertification. Rogars achieved 0.0% utilization, and we'd like to recommend their recertification for 6 months, which is a reduction from their last certification. And Stark Excavating achieved 11.6% utilization, and we'd like to recommend their recertification for 1 year.
Are there any comments, questions, or should we move for discussion?
I can't read the applied research. It's all too faded. So I can't read
Their submission?
the applied research, their stats. It's like, I can't read it.
Applied Research, they're,
Oh,
They-
on their application?
Mm.
Yeah, the application,
Oh, the
well, there's
application.
some attachments.
Mhm.
Mhm.
let me see if we have it here.
And it says received September 2015, but I see the signature is for September 2014.
This is a,
Robin
we
Jones.
caught that and we asked them
Robin
to
Jones.
correct.
Mm. Mhm.
We caught it and we asked them to correct their
Mm,
application,
mhm.
so they resubmitted it with the corrected date.
Mhm.
I'll go ahead and share a more easier to read copy.
Can,
The only one I did have one question about, Open Road Paving, their numbers haven't changed significantly since the last time. I mean, they've changed 15%, so, you know, an increase in population, but their female population has dropped significantly. Everything else looks, well, they lost a significant Latino population. They added African Americans. I don't know. I guess could you give your reasoning behind the 2 year? This is Open Road Paving LLC.
During my, at least in the early part of my tenure, one of the rules of thumb is that I'm trying to remain as consistent as possible with predecessors in my office. And so as I looked at the data and I saw that they maintained in 15 a utilization rate similar to what they maintained in 12, I decided to recommend recertifying at the rate that they were certified last time. That does not mean, of course, that I'm opposed to reducing that. I very much appreciated Peter's comments that our 2-year certification really is a gold standard. I mean, we are telling that company, you are doing great work, and we don't need to see anything from you for 2 years. The city of Champaign does not certify that long. They certify every 1 year, every year. So I completely support the idea that that 2 year is a gold standard, and should the commission feel that 1 year is more appropriate, I would concur with that as well.
Peter?
I'm happy to go ahead and make the motion. So the motion will be for certification of applied research for 1 year, Champagne Signal and Lighting for 6 months, Clark Dietz for 1 year, Corrective Asphalt for 1 year, Central Illinois Tile for 2 years, Hoare Construction for 1 year, Ileana Construction for 1 year, Kinney Contractors for 1 year, Open Road Paving for 1 year, Rogarts for 6 months, and Stark Excavating for 1 year.
Okay, I have a thing. If I read the stats on the applied research, it just seems like it doesn't look very good at all. It looks like it's like everybody's white and there's a few minorities. I understand it's in Albuquerque there, but still, the women are the secretaries, I guess. And I'm just asking, like, why 1 year? And what do they do anyway for the city?
So I think we should probably take a second on the motion, and then we can maybe talk about,
Okay, okay.
or we can let it die and,
Either one.
and start over, but
Either
Mm.
way.
Okay.
Is there a second for purposes of discussion?
I'll second it.
Okay. So applied research, yeah.
So you're thinking of going down to 6 months for applied research?
Right, but I'd like to know, what do they do
Oh,
also?
what contract are they on? Do we know?
Is it for like, are they like looking at the gravel that goes in the potholes and seeing, you know?
I'm not quite sure exactly what, how we've utilized them or what bids they're interested in bidding for. That is something that I'm considering requesting as part of an applicant packet. I've already begun the revision of the form, and which is another reason why I was looking forward to the committees, because they will be able to help me with vetting some of those ideas. So today, I'm not really able to comment on how we're utilizing them, and a description of their company services isn't really a submission in the packet. In terms of the justification or the rationale for 1 year, again, it's the same rationale that I gave for the last one. I'm trying to be as consistent in deferring to the practice of my predecessors. However, I do not have an objection to recertifying them at a shorter term.
What, I'm sorry, and now I went back to look at the form again. What were their local numbers? Because this is a company that is local, that has home offices in Albuquerque.
Okay, so yeah, that's what.
Did they give us separate local numbers?
Yes. We do have local numbers.
So
and-
they're, essentially, I see, they are an engineering firm,
Yeah.
okay, and they do engineering. I mean, like, you know, complex and challenging problems in the physical sciences.
So does it say how many folks they're going to have on our local project? Aha.
Or are they just doing consulting
Here it
for the
is.
city?
Aha. Okay, so the totals across the board for local are 59.
Yeah.
This is very strangely laid out, but okay. 2 Hispanic males, 2 African American males, 6 Asian males, and then 3 Asian women, and only 17 women total.
Mm-hmm. And they are, it looks like they're all administrative, most of them?
The women,
Or I guess I'm looking at the national, I was looking at the national thing.
right, the women are mostly listed under the professional
Yeah.
category.
Maybe the local.
Most of the employees are under the professional category.
Mhm.
So 28 white men. So yeah, 50 total under, of the 59. Previous, I'm sorry. So 50 total of the 71. I was looking at the wrong line. So, but the numbers are increased across the board at that, similar. So 16 white female, 4 Asian female, 41 white male, 3 African American male, 7 Asian male, and no Latinos at all.
And they're actually U.S. government contractors too, so don't they also have to meet certain federal guidelines as well?
Yes, yes, they do.
Yeah. I mean, the federal contract is.
Would anyone like to make a friendly amendment to our motion?
I think we as a commission are in the same boat that Alex is in regards to, I mean, Alex is recommending based on our past action.
And I would say that the one other reason to leave them at 1 year instead of going down to 6 months or asking them for more data is overall population, they've lost 77 employees.
Okay, so I didn't see that.
And so they're showing a 7% decline overall in their numbers.
But no decline in.
And actually
Or no.
less of a decline in other numbers, except for women. They've lost 17% of their women. So, yeah, I think it's hard to push too much harder than 1 year, given that they've had a loss of population overall.
Okay, I see. That's fine.
In
Fran?
contrast,
On the other hand.
Kinney Contractors has grown by 20 people, and they lost one of their black employees, and the percentage of females has gone down. And they do say 3 minorities, and that's good that they have been hired. But
And they didn't
What
give
does
us
that
churn
mean?
numbers.
yeah, I don't know. It at 4.5%. I understand. Maybe you're trying to be conservative about going from 2 years to 1. Yeah. Maybe that's enough of a shock. Okay. I just wanted to point that out. It
If we're
did
going
not
with
make me
kind of,
happy to see that.
if we're going with kind of past procedure, I think that's
Right,
kind
and
of our
being-
general move.
stepping down rather
is,
than
you know,
bringing them
it'll get
way
their
down.
attention, but it's not quite as sort of heavy as the 6th month or a request for additional information.
And
no
similarly
doubt.
for corrective asphalt, they have
They're
no
just-
minorities.
They're just right at that 15 threshold, but
Right.
Right.
Well, they just went over it.
They just went over it last time. They got the 2 years simply because they were under the threshold.
Exactly. So I just want to point that out and see how people feel.
Good.
Those
No,
are the only things that struck me.
Those are good. Yep. Other comments, questions, observations? If not, do we need to amend? No, we're saying,
No one has
no.
suggested.
Okay.
No one has suggested an amendment so far.
Okay.
so-
All right. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, the same? Great, thank you.
May I, hey, Alex, or Tony, either one, would it be possible that for us, I know for the website it needs to be PDF, but this document gets rather long, and I have a really lazy eye, and it's hard for me to follow. Is there any way that we can get the Excel version for the commissioners so that I can, like, freeze panes and keep the top
To just
portion.
send out the actual Excel file.
Yeah,
Of course we can.
that would be
Yep.
really wonderful for me. Thank you.
We might password protect it
That's fine.
and give you the password, but have it, one password for the commission, and keep it the same forever. So
would-
we'll just
yeah.
ask you to keep it, the password
That
confidential.
would be fine.
Okay, we'll
I
begin that
appreciate that.
practice effective the next meeting.
Great, thank you. The HRO activity report.
I am really excited to share with you, first, in terms of substantial contacts. Our substantial contacts are down this year. I recently provided a report on housing activity to our community development group. They report out to the government, and I believe last year we may have had in the teens complaints that related to housing. And this last programmatic year, we had 2. So that is really nice to hear.
We hope for the right reason.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
this
gonna
is-
say, we hope it's
There's
good.
no way we can tell if the reasons are.
Right now, the only substantive contact that is now open is a complainant is deliberating, filing a charge, and he has concluded his deliberation process. And he's frightened, but he is going to be filing a charge, and so we are processing that charge this week. In terms of pending charges, we have, in terms of our national origin case, we received a response from the respondent, and I am in the process of reviewing the legal arguments that the attorneys have provided the office for why we have no jurisdiction in the matter. In the second case, we are scheduling interviews for the witnesses in that case. On the third, we are beginning the interview phase, which is a change from last time. And on the fourth case is a new case, and in that case, I am in the process of scheduling interviews with the respondent. They have already submitted a response.
Great, any questions? Peter?
I would just make one quick comment with regard to housing. We may find it's that time of year that everybody's coming into town and finding new housing. We may get some additional complaints, but maybe going forward, and maybe this is something for the commission as a whole to take up. I know we've talked to the tenant union in the past, and maybe discussing with them whether they're seeing patterns, because we do want to make sure that it is that things have gotten better for tenants as opposed to there might be some reason that we're not getting complaints independent of that. So that might be something to discuss.
Great, great reminder.
I have a question, too. Is there any point in the process of renting an apartment or property where the applicant is informed of their protections under the ordinance? Because I remember when I was in the workplace, it was really, I loved seeing that thing on the wall that said, no, they do have to pay you, as once I had to invoke that. And I just wondered about that, if there's any point where, maybe this is part of our community outreach kind of thing, but where we could provide that so we're sure people know their rights.
I will research that and get an answer back for the next meeting. I am going to be having a meeting with a director of a housing group sometime in the next month and a half. She's interested in providing a training program in the area of housing, and if we can, I'd like to partner with her and get that accomplished. And that would be a great forum to see what the temperature is in that area.
Great. Peter?
So Section 12-107 of our ordinance says, every person subject to this article shall post and keep in a conspicuous location where business or activity is customarily conducted or negotiated a notice provided by the city of Urbana, whose form and language shall have been prepared by the officer, setting forth excerpts from or summaries of the pertinent provisions of this article and information pertinent to the filing of complaint. Now, we have
seen
been lax in doing so. This has been brought up over the years, and there have been periods of time where we actually produced a placard for different things, and whether it consistently goes out is something that we should look into. But
I honestly think there's no excuse for not doing that.
Well, and the reality is also, I think the difference between an employment poster and this is applications are often, I mean, there are times where you don't ever see the physical office when applying for housing. So it might be important to look at whether or not it needs to not be posted, but included in the application process, like paperwork. I mean, that might be the step, because you're an employee, there's usually an employee break area or employee area, you're already on site for those to be, and everybody knows, but you may not actually be in the office where they're reviewing your application for housing.
and the wording is where business or activity is customarily conducted or negotiated. So maybe the only way for certain landlords to satisfy the requirement is to include it on the application.
That would be fine. But the main trauma I had, the main experience that I witnessed of someone being denied on the basis of race, this is many years ago, nothing was in writing. It was just, he called me because I was subletting my apartment. The manager asked me to bring him by. He was black, he was African American, I think he was African actually. And she just was frantically trying to signal to me that this is a no-no and everything. And he was very accepting of it, but I was not. And I immediately made some phone calls about that. But I'm just saying, sometimes these things, you know, there would be a point, however, everyone should get an application. Everyone who asks for one should get one, and then it should be on that. I think it's a really good idea.
Welcome to Alex's job. Proving
Well, I
discrimination is one of the hardest things in
But-
the
Yeah.
world.
Okay, so for
Oh.
me, one of the big ones is, I thought there's supposed to be something for every public place of business. I haven't seen one yet
Yep.
in Urbana.
That
And
is
let me
the
tell you,
requirement.
you think, oh, nobody would ever be so stupid as to, but it happens, right? You know, where comments are made or people aren't served, and you don't think it happens, but it does. So I'm just wondering, isn't that, and I've actually told so many people, it's the law, you know, but I haven't actually seen it.
So somewhere in your files, there was such a thing prepared, and
Like a little
reviewing
frame.
when the last time it was sent out and to whom would probably be a good thing to look into.
Thank you.
About the county clerk.
And this may be a good assignment for the public policy / community relations.
I would be
Me
delighted.
too, me too,
Sounds
me
like a needle
too.
in a haystack to me.
Yeah.
All right, and finally, our budget. I think it's stayed the same since the last meeting.
We actually have
Or-
had one expenditure since the last meeting. If you look at the grants and sponsorships line items, the
Oh,
third one
sorry,
from the
yeah.
bottom, we started the fiscal year on July 1st with $1,500 in that line item. On July 31st, we made a payment to the city of Champaign for the city of Urbana's sponsorship of the 2015 CU International Humanitarian Awards,
correct.
which was a very nice program this year, by the way. That was $1,200, so we have a balance left of $300 in that line item. All the others remain the same.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Alex, any last announcements or?
Just a few. First of all, I again want to reiterate Tony's comment. This was my first humanitarian awards gala that I attended, and it was wonderful. I was extremely impressed. I was also excited that Frances was able to attend and represent the commission. She sat at the table for the city of Urbana, And I was wondering if you could just say a few words about your experience.
Well, it's one of my favorite duties as a member of the commission, to be in a social context, to meet new people who have the same interests, and to learn about what some people are doing of so much importance, and to see the wonderful entertainment. I recommend it to everybody.
Thank you.
Finally, I had the opportunity to do the closing remarks, and as I was drafting the closing remarks, I wanted to. Was a unique opportunity for the HRO to communicate to really the humanitarian elite in the community. And in the closing remarks, I referenced that it was an honor to address the community of humanitarians and to briefly and tastefully highlight the Human Rights Ordinance and Commission. And I think it was well received. And I also acknowledged the city of Champaign. Their human rights officer was present that evening as well. So that was a very good outreach opportunity as well. And in the closing remarks, I also referenced outright the commission, the Human Relations Commissions of Urbana and Champaign. So it was a great outreach opportunity as well. The only other announcements I wanted to make is that in the minutes of the last meeting, I mentioned that I would be attending the Springfield gathering of the United States Minority Contractors Association, and that was this morning. I attended this morning. It was in one of the boardrooms of the Capital Development Board, I believe is the name, and they spend quite a bit of money per year on projects throughout the state of Illinois. And I may have mentioned this before, but I believe that they succeeded in achieving 20% utilization of minorities in the purchasing. And that turned out to be almost $500 million that went into these companies. They are doing very well at the state level of trying to utilize minority and disadvantaged businesses. And it's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do in the next coming year. There were, at the meeting, were a cross-section of individuals, both minority contractors, small, large majority contractors, government officials, and it was nice to see a candid conversation about where are we. The issue of minority recruitment of minorities in the labor unions came up. It's a little bit of a sore thumb. People got a little uncomfortable, but they had the conversation, and it looks like they're going to put it on their agenda for their next meeting, which will happen in Peoria sometime next year. I also wanted to report out that I was able to attend the worship service at the mosque on Friday. It was wonderful. There were several individuals present to greet me. We exchanged greetings, worshipped at the mosque. It was a beautiful experience. Learned more about the outreach, the humanitarian outreach that they engage in. And what was particularly nice was also that they were one of the humanitarian award recipients, and they were present at the gala that day. Finally, I wanted to mention, actually, that's about it. I'm done.
Are there any additional announcements before we adjourn? If not, thank you all. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.